call the meeting to order. At this time, we'll do our roll call. If you're here, say you're here. Well, I guess that's regarding or not. Nancy Baker.
Here.
Ronnie Beal. Carl here. Tyson's not here. Larry Cox is here. Casey Cooper. Carolyn Coward.
Here.
Joyce Edwards. I think she's
That's all I did. She just logged in.
okay. Maggie Faulkner.
Here.
Vicki Green is not here, but she's given her proxy to.
Carolyn, I thought she indicated she'd given her proxy to you.
Okay, don't know, but
We will follow up on that. That was
Okay.
what she indicated to us on the phone.
Myrna Harris here.
here.
Okay. Jim Peck.
Here.
Judy Johansson. Here. Michael Lavender.
Here.
Pat McGinnis.
Here.
Marsh Pittman. Judy Poe.
I have a proxy.
Okay. Mandy Stone.
Here.
Duncan Sumter.
Here.
Ed Charlton.
Here.
Charles Vines. I believe we have a quorum.
Right.
Thank you. And also tonight, we are very pleased to have with us Senator Terry Van Dyken, and pleasure to have you here tonight. And would you like to say a few words?
Well, I just want to thank you all for letting me join you this evening. Mental health and healthcare in general are two areas that I'm particularly interested in, and I'm privileged to have the opportunity to learn from you all. And I hope you'll reach out to me if there is ever anything I can do or anything I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we have public comment. We have the sign. First name is Kathy. Is here. Is Kathy here? Okay, thank you.
My name's Dr. Catherine Ryder. I'm a former case manager when the CAP MRDD world was still in place, and I'm the parent of 3 children, an adult who is on the innovations waiver. You met him several months ago. I've got no comments today, but I want to start with an aside, or maybe it's a digression. Mary tells me that it's a generational thing, and I should be understanding when people of a certain age, even though that's my age, in fact, look right over the disabled. So Katie and Joanne were not offered this flyer, okay? I don't know Joanne, and I do know Katie. I know Katie can't read, but I'd like her to be, you know, I'd like her at least to be offered a flyer. So I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to gently encourage all of us to be more considerate. Okay, what I'm here for today. Last month, the oral CFAC report to the Board of Directors described how key staff attended seminars and local meetings were held. Members participated in community meetings and committee meetings and state and local meetings as well. Some of the CFAC trainings were offered to the public. The committee also accommodated a member with a temporary mobility issue. The CFAC did not report on issues shared with the smoking organization that were of importance to consumers and families. Yet it's my understanding that the CFAC role is to advise you about things that are important to people like me. I would like to ask that the CFAC's report start to include those issues, as well as how the information was gathered. Here's an example. CFAC needs to explain to smoking, and probably the consumer world, the impact come January when the Affordable Care Act requires full-time employees to be covered by insurance. But instead, many of our service providers will be putting staff limits of 25 or 28 hours a week. Consumers, especially those with health and behavioral issues, my favorite kind, will be significantly and negatively impacted when they lose their full-time staff. We need to educate people, and I think that should be part of the CFAC job. I'd like to ask that the CFAC provide a response to the public comments made at these meetings because they're critical incidents. Jerry talks, Mary talks, I talk. It would be nice if somebody, and I'm assuming it's CFAC because you guys represent me, would at least acknowledge and address my issues. I think that's important. I'd like that it be easier to contact the CFAC via the webpage and that we don't have to go through a staff intermediary. I should be able to pull up Nancy's email or Nancy's name and send an email to her that's blind. I don't have to know her personal email. I shouldn't have to go through a staff person to do that, although I do happen to have her email. I would like to ask that the CFAC improve its outreach to the community. There's nothing in the Asheville Citizen-Times or the Mountain Express about the CFAC. CFAC never contacts the Mission Family Support Network, which has support groups in several counties. CFAC did not ensure that the gap analysis document included real information about the IDD population. We've got some missed opportunities here, folks. I want to end with a specific call to action, because this one bothers me personally. The community needs to know that come November 1st, prescriptions written by a non-Medicaid provider will not be filled for a Medicaid consumer. Now, both of my children with mental illness do not have a Medicaid psychiatrist because either they have very large waiting lists or they're not comfortable with our special population. I don't know, but Thomas doesn't do well when he's not on his $2,000 worth of drugs. So we need to let people know, come November 1, when you go to the pharmacy, you might be in trouble. Thank you so much as always.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mary Short.
Hello, I'm Mary Short from Alexander County, and that's Katie. And there's been a lot that's been going on the past month actually, and it's a little overwhelming for me. First of all, the quality committee meeting again, we get this IDD dashboard that you all used to get in your board packets, but it's been shuffled off to this quality committee meeting thing. And last month, I always want to talk to you about relatives as provider. So last month we had 321 relative as providers. This month we have 322. Last month we had 90 who were doing more than 40 hours. This month we have 83. Okay, I can see you don't care or you don't get it. So then they talked about this backup staffing report. And this was the first quarterly report that apparently has been prepared and they're working on it, and I know there's a problem with staff, blah, blah, blah. So it's really interesting. It's not your board packet, but the last sentence here, grand totals for our catchment area during the span of time reach of reported 18,194 hours were missed. And you have 1,581 individuals on the waiver. 18,194 hours were missed. But we dropped relatives who could work more than 40 hours down from 90 to 83. So I guess you're assuming that those hours that weren't worked, and oh yeah, on the back of it in the pink chart, most of the hours that weren't worked were either personal care or in-home skill building. Those would be services that relatives can't provide, that we don't get approved to do over 40, because you all decide if we do more than 40. Smokey decides. The service provider doesn't decide. Smokey decides. And so it's just sort of, is somebody going to connect the dots? I mean, this just doesn't seem like rocket science to me. I don't understand. So the IDD listening tours that Dave Richard is going on have become completely fascinating. And the major complaint is care coordination and the issues around care coordination. Are you aware that we all are having difficulty getting copies of our plan of care, our ISP, prior to being asked to sign it? We have our little ISP meeting and we all work as a team, and then the care coordinator is supposed to write it all up, and then we're all supposed to sign it and submit it to utilization review. But apparently we're just being told to sign the page. And it's a huge item that is coming up at these IDD listening tour meetings. And it's especially sort of to piggyback on what Kathy had to say is these IDD listening tours apparently are sponsored or attended by the local CFAX, wherever Dave is going to speak. And Dave says over and over and over again that the department and division is getting most of their input into the changes for the 1915C waiver, the NC Innovations waiver, from the CFAX. But listen to what your CFAC has to say. I'm not kidding you. And think, oh, so they're giving input to Dave about how to change the waiver for Katie and this other young lady, Joanne, who you're going to meet in a minute. It's just all getting to be hysterically ridiculous. And I do wonder, the issue of the Affordable Care Act, I'm a firm believer that we, IDD, do not belong in this LME MCO system, and you're never going to convince me that we belong here. We belong in a department or a division of long-term services and supports. And the idea that those CAP DA individuals, those elderly people and the other adult disabled people, their service provider agencies who are nursing agencies, they are going to be hit with these same Obamacare regulations. And I wonder how the hundreds of thousands of those individuals are going to speak up. And what is the state doing to protect their workers? What is the state doing to see that the providers understand you can't have part-time staff, who doesn't show up. But at least the elderly, I mean, they, for the most part, I'm again generalizing, but for the most part, if their staff doesn't show up, it's not a health and safety, adult protective service issue. They're pretty much competent to be left alone, but I'm fingers crossed, you know, that those CAP DA people and those nursing agencies are going to save us, because the LME MCO system isn't.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jerry Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's always nice to get to talk to people that have a great wealth of knowledge. Kids are all smart people at UNB. But I see things a lot of times that don't take smart people to see. But it takes smart people to fix it if it would. Mental health reform. I want to make you think. Mental health reform, 2001. You ever heard that? It's 2014, and it's still being reformed. I've never seen nothing reformed as much in my life. And it still ain't fixed, and I don't think we'll ever see it in our lifetime fixed. I did have hope when Blue Ridge Mental Health was around. You did get service. Might not have been what we thought, but at least we did get service. And people weren't left out either. I guess the thing that bothers me is quality of care. The mother talked about the signing of the page. I've been around 27 years, and I've had more case managers and people stick papers under my nose and the client's nose and saying, sign this, we need this, and never give them the other sheets of paper. They just wanted the signature so they could get their money. And it's still going on. You done heard that. The other thing that concerns me is the steps of we should be working on prevention. I don't hear prevention here in this meeting at all. Quality of care, I don't hear prevention like we should. It's all about emergencies. And we've been in emergency since 2001 when it started to reform. We have crisis teams. We have crisis centers and want to build more. We have a packed ER room and want to build more crisis centers. We have a hospitals that never cared about the human life of a person that had mental health for years and years and years, but all of a sudden they want to get in the game. If hospitals are going to get in the game, they should know how it works. They work on your body. They think your head's not a part of your body. Now they want in the game. Why? Because of money. Follow the money. Our finance director teaches us that. Follow the money. You'd make more fuss over money than you do human life. Now, if you take it personal, then you might get hurt. But take it as, what can we do to change this thing? The state people ain't gonna change it. Our hospitals are getting larger. Our ERs are getting larger. Crisis centers are getting larger. We're saving a lot of people. But what about the state hospitals? Dorothy Dix, you can see the fight over money. They're taking the poor things, the people of the poor status, the mental health, people that can't defend themselves from the state institution, and I'm glad our senator's here, she can take it back to Raleigh.
Yeah.
Because when they start taking Dorothy Dix away from us and taking the land that we could use to help poor people, they took the primary source of what somebody stood up one day and gave us as poor people and people of need. They're taking it away from us to make economic development. What about that? Now, I want you to really think. When you go home this evening, I want you for the next week or two, at least 2 weeks, I want you to read the newspaper in the deaths and funerals. And I want you to see what I see. Young people, old people, middle-aged people. But look at their death and find out what caused it. And then you'll think about the reform of 2001 and where we're at today. And when we talk about quality of care, really think about what you're saying. Because if it was, I don't think we'd be reading the newspaper the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Our next speaker is Charles Baker.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the first time I've ever been up in front of anybody like y'all. My daughter right there in the wheelchair, she's the most precious thing that I have, outside of possibly my son, wherever he is today. I've been taking care of my daughter for the last 25 years. My wife died 8.5 years ago, and I'm a single parent now. All I know is that every year that goes on, it gets harder and harder to get care, decent care, or competent care for people like my daughter or anybody else that's in the IDD world. I think in the last week or so, I probably made somebody here mad. If I had, good. I'm going to continue to be a thorn in somebody's side so that my daughter has at least a reasonable quality of life for as long as I can see that she gets it. However long that might be from now on, I don't know. But as long as I'm able, I'm going to do it. You folks have the power to see that people are cared for properly instead of all of the paperwork and the meetings that you all conduct. Because basically what I see most of the time, not a whole lot comes of it. The caregivers, the parents, guardians, and to some extent the service providers, they're the ones that do the work. You all are more or less just like armchair generals. I hope that things do improve, but from what I can see and what I've heard, I don't hold much hope for that. It's just going to be that much more of an uphill fight for people like me, people like Mary, and for all the rest of us in the IDD world. I hope you all think about that with upcoming decisions that you all make. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is review and approval of the agenda. We have one item we need to add under J in closed session.
Yeah, it's 143-31811, parent 6. To consider qualifications, competence, performance, character, business conditions, employment, individual,
Adding that to closed session, the other closed session item under J, that addition, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Is there a second? motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next item is review and approval of the minutes from the August 28th meeting. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? If so, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the August 28th meeting?
So moved.
We have a motion, is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes from August 28th? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Next item is the conflict of interest disclosure, and call on Tracy Hayes, our general counsel.
This is the opportunity for any board members to disclose any conflicts of interest that may have arisen since the last board meeting. If anybody has anything they wish to disclose, please speak up now. There's nothing to disclose, that's it.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the Consumer and Family Advisory Committee report. We'll call on Pat McGinnis, the CPAC chair. Pat?
Thank you. I'm only one of three. There's Nancy and Judy here also. And I just want to point that out. The CFAC Steering Committee, we met face-to-face on September the 12th in Asheville. CFAC also held its annual retreat September the 12th and 13th in Asheville with the following agenda items. At the request of some of our members, there was a section where my story was told, and they went around the room, and we did ask staff to leave the room, and one other couple were asked to leave the room, and people told their stories. And is a recovery-based practice. You know, and some of the stories were really very disturbing and very touching at the same time, especially when you have people sitting around the room talking about how they've been assaulted, maybe several years ago, but they've been assaulted and raped and that sort of thing by their therapists and stuff. You just couldn't imagine some of the stories you hear. And then you heard some really wonderful stories about how some of the providers have saved people's lives. And we also talked about, after the storytelling, the provider monitoring plan. We talked about program integrity. We talked about gap analysis, needs assessment over needs, and then we had disability-specific breakouts. Our CFAC committee will have local meetings in October. The Central Region will be October the 13th. The Western Region will be October the 14th. The Southern Region will be October the 20th, and the Northern Region will be October the 21st. And I might add, these meetings are open to the public. And although we may not do it in this room, we do go out and try to do outreach and are seeking new members in many of the regions. I was just talking last week to some folks all the way from Murphy about putting in a CFAC application. So I try to do outreach whenever I can, but you know, you don't have to be contacted to apply for CFAC. You can apply if you have an interest, whether you're contacted or not. And different regions may handle things differently. Myself, in my region, there's some talk about not having staff involved. I kind of prefer that staff be involved when I get stuff, because I want transparency of what comes to me. I want it across the board, and I want it shared, not only with my area, but with all the areas, and including staff. That way, everybody knows what I've been told and what they've been told. So, you know, different regions and different folks may be doing it differently, but whether it be a CFAC application or a phone call or an email correspondence or whatever, I'm pretty transparent, and I want it out there when it comes to anybody dealing with me, and I'm going to be that way, and I'm sorry if that disappoints anybody. But that's how I do things, and it's up to each regional chair to do things somewhat in their own way. And for me, I don't have the greatest computer skills and stuff, so occasionally I may need a little extra help from staff, and I'm glad they're there. You know, I can tell them what I need, and I'm glad they're there to assist me. It may not work out that way for everybody. There are a lot of skilled folks in here, got a lot more skills on CFAC than I do, but for me, their help is appreciated. Our CFAC members, we are pleased to continue to be involved in a variety of committees, all the way to board level committees. committees now. I just left a board level committee meeting before I come in here. And, serve in a variety of places. And, have a variety of involvement. Also, we are still taking advantage of some of the trainings that Smokey's opened up, and you folks from the community, I would encourage you to go to Smokey website and look at the trainings and see if there anything you might like. Now, today's not a great day for me, and I'm gonna tell you why. I told about it in this committee meeting a minute ago, but I'm gonna share it. My best friend's son is suicidal. I spent the last 3 days on the phone with him, trying to talk him into going to get treatment. Yesterday, night before last, I sent Brian Shupin an email. Brian called him yesterday. I called the crisis line and got some information too earlier in the week. He finally went to a clinic yesterday and walked in. Unfortunately, he didn't get what he needed, and he's still suicidal, and he actually told them he might go home and bust a cap in his head. So his mother calls me 5 minutes before I get here and says, I'm on the road almost to Morganton trying to decide whether to go to a walk-in doctor's office, the ER in Morganton or the ER in Hickory. But he still needs help. This is after he was at the ER one day last week in the county I live in, where they told him, go get mental health help. He thought he was having a heart attack. He was having panic and anxiety attacks. So he was let go from there. He didn't get what he needed then. So he's probably somewhere sitting in the waiting room waiting to be seen now as I'm here speaking. And there's a huge history of suicide and family mental illness in this family. And I told him the day before yesterday, and I spent hours on the phone trying to get to where I felt he wasn't going to do anything to harm himself before I got off the phone with him. Why he reached out to me, I don't know. But a lot of you folks wouldn't believe the calls that some of us CFAT members get and the hours we spend on the phone with folks. But he's reached out to me, and I've spent hours in the last 3 days on the telephone with him, trying to provide peer support and family support and whatever other kind of support. So he walked in yesterday. He didn't get what he needed. But I did tell him, your mother could get you the help. And we found her brother a few years ago dead over here in Hendersonville, who's also a mental health client. And I went over there the day they found the body, so I know the family history. But, then there's another problem. He lost his job last week because he had such anxiety, couldn't go to work. So I didn't figure he had any insurance. But I learned yesterday he has insurance, which I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, because folks like him, he's not on Medicaid, so he's probably not none of this data that's being collected. But I didn't know this. If I'm attending a funeral later in the week, it's because he didn't get the help he needs. And, I don't know where we go from here. I don't know where the help is. And I'm a little bit ashamed to talk to him and his mother because, in some ways I knew things were bad and there were challenges. But I don't think that I realize the challenges are quite as bad when people are in mental health crises as I realize they are right now. And, I received other phone calls. There's a couple of phone calls that I seem to get a day or two before this board meeting on a regular basis. And I received some from other catchment areas last night as the 40 hours and the family members versus outside providers and this, that, and the other. So for you folks that don't think we're doing enough at CFAC, I'm sorry we're not doing what you think we ought to be doing. You would be amazed at the number of hours, not just in committee meetings and sitting here, but answering the phone and trying to be referral sources and trying to help people in the community, because they call us many times when they don't know who else to call. I think, well, she may know something about this or that or the other. So we're just trying to be good citizens, and we're volunteers, and we're family members, and we're clients, and we're consumers, and we're also community members. And I fall into a variety of places on there, all the way to the fact that my stepmother committed suicide a few years ago. So I don't know why God put me at this table, but I hope I'm making a difference in somebody's life. And I believe, somehow, we all believe we are that are on CFAC, or we wouldn't bother to go to these meetings. You know, I've got a new grandbaby, that's 8 weeks old. It'd be very much easier for me to drop down the road and be sitting in the floor playing with the grandbaby than it would be for me to be at this meeting. But I'm committed, for one thing, to seeing that nobody goes through the struggles I've been through in my past, or that my family's been through. And part of that includes suicide. But, and another part of it includes, you know, I've been discussed when I wasn't around, and I don't really believe in nothing about us with us. Another part of it includes alcoholism and substance abuse and mental health. So, and then my significant other, he's got a daughter that's got IDD challenges. So, you know, I feel like I'm kind of well-rounded in some ways to be at this table, but at times I question why I'm here. And, you know, please, come to CFAC meetings, get involved. Y'all, some of you folks probably far smarter than many of us. Why don't you come and help us instead of criticize us? And that's my report. I'm probably went on too far, but, you know, we're just doing the best we can with this unit.
Our next item on the agenda is Provider Advisory Council report. Duncan Sumpter, Vice President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. From the Provider Council standpoint, I'd like to report out we had our annual retreat a couple of weeks ago. And as many of our public speakers, Jerry and Pat have pointed out, we've been reformed as a system for well over a decade, and probably even longer than that if you look into it. And our system is not ideal by any stretch of the matter. There are not enough funds, there's not enough support, and there are not enough people committed to the system being where it needs to be. And we really grappled with that as a network. We had an initial session before smoking was involved, and a lot of our discussion was around how can we be relevant as a partner with consumers and families, other providers, the MCOs, and whatever else is available in this network to hash together the best thing that we can. And it was a long discussion, and this is a discussion that usually takes 5 or 10 minutes, but there are multiple wheels moving all the time. The common theme from the provider standpoint was it's going to be difficult for the system to tolerate another change without there being a lot more gaps in services and people hurt. And that was the main thing, consensus from the provider network. The second piece was how do we be relevant in this? You know, there's the Western Region Provider Partnership between the MCOs. There are things going on at the state level, and things are in limbo. And so, first of all, as a provider council, are we relevant? Was it important for us to stay intact, or should we focus our energies elsewhere? And Smokey came in the afternoon session, really cleared up a lot of things around some of the strategic plan, and I'm probably going to talk, I'm sure we'll talk later today. And it really helped us figure out where we needed to go to be able to support consumers and families in our mission, our overall mission together. So we feel real good about that component. We are not in a place of believing that the system is perfect, because it just isn't. There are tons of gaps. But it's our job to work with everybody to do the best that we can to prop up what needs to be there. We are extremely appreciative of CFAC being a part of our provider network. Pat and others come in and provide a perspective to these meetings that is essential, without question. It really is. And so again, Pat, thank you for being involved in that. There are local regional collaboratives that are open to all providers and consumers and families. And again, the more people that are involved in that, the more folks we can pull together to help out with the gaps and things that we don't have. So really want to encourage people who have good ideas and good energy around that to please get involved, because you do matter and it is very important. The other piece that I'd like to report out on is the Provider Council's been in touch with Smokey leadership about the challenges coming in January with agencies and health insurance and other things, and talking about how do we provide the right amount of information and collaboration and support, not only to agencies, but also provide, consumer and family groups to make sure that there aren't additional gaps that come into play really soon. And things are very complicated for a lot of people. And you have large agencies and even small agencies that have some really smart people in them, but it's very difficult to navigate all the things that are happening as quickly as they're moving. So we have an obligation to work together. We made a commitment with Smokey to work with them on providing as much support that seems relevant as possible. So again, we appreciate the ability to be partners and the system moving forward. And we know it's not perfect, but working together, we're going to get places a lot faster than we will otherwise. The other piece I'd like to add is Smokey has done historically and continues to do a great job of being transparent and interactive with the provider network around multiple issues. And again, that just allows us to work together to get to the best place we can given the resources that are available.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the County Commissioner Advisory Board report. Call on Mike Challenger. Any update?
Mr. Chairman, we will have a meeting coming up in a few weeks, but we've not met since our August meeting, so there's nothing new to report there. However, while I have the report, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to comment on an earlier issue. Wish Dr. Ryder were here. I started to comment at that time, but I'd just like to say that I appreciate the work our CPAC does. I've been on the mental health board since 2002, and this is the most active CPAC we've ever had. I'm amazed at the hours these folks put in and how regular they are in their attendance and the comments they provide in the meeting. And I think we owe them gratitude for not trying to heap more on them as volunteers. I assure you that Pat probably spends more hours than 95% of those of us on the board. And some of the things Dr. Ryder talked about, I think, were maybe legitimate, but they're concerns for staff, not putting down our seat. That's just my comment.
Thank you. Our next item is the report of the Finance Committee. Call on Ed Charlton. That was to pose who's the chairman of the Finance Committee. Is not here. Ed filled in for earlier today. Ed, on to that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee did meet this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and President Lisa presented everything that you have included in the packet that was sent to you or given to you when you attended the meeting tonight. And two items in particular, item number 4, which was the August 2014 financial report, and the August 2014 financial dashboard. All of those were presented, as well as the budget continuation of allocation and the budget amendments. These were both voted on by the Finance Committee and approved, and I would offer to you tonight a motion that you approve the actions of your Finance Committee. I do that to you in the motion.
There's a motion from the Finance Committee. Okay, we have a second. Larry Cox seconded. Any more discussion? Since there's no more discussion, all in favor of the action from the Finance Committee meeting, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
I do have 2 small items to add. Resolutions that were passed by the board during its last board meeting were reviewed and accepted by the mental health, so that the increases to those 3 fund balance amounts that in regards to employees and their benefit plan increases were made, as well as the allocation for leasehold improvements and or equipment purchases associated with the administrative office and at the Richfield site, or other alternative expenditures that can be appropriate resources.
All right, the next item we have on the agenda is a closed session. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A3, to consult with the attorneys in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege concerning matters of litigation and to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina Code Statute 122C-126.1 or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the Code Statute. And Jay, there's another one, the other one we talked about earlier was
Number 6, personnel.
okay. Okay. All right, we have a motion to approve and go into closed session.
So moved.
Is there a second? All right. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Okay, we're in closed session.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, pursuant to a conversation in our closed session, I make a motion that we approve a new contract with our executive director, retroactive to July 1st, with minor modifications regarding dates of employment evaluations and so forth, and that we provide a two-step salary increase that would take Pride's salary to $197,971.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion, or any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. All right, our next item is other board committee reports. Who's reporting on performance and quality committee?
Mr. Chairman, I'll do that. Paul Clausen from Logan County is the normal chair, but he had other commitments tonight and couldn't be here. Performance and quality committee met and reviewed monthly reports for performance improvement grid, the DHHS report, an IDD dashboard, and our quality reports regarding backup staffing. You may have heard Dr. Ryder mention that as well. Also, Julie Sinclair is our staff liaison that provided updates on some questions we had last month and is continuing to follow up on a couple of other issues with the state. We had asked, for example, that some of the reported measures look more directly at small or rural counties versus urban counties because of differences in our ability to provide similar services in a timely manner. So she has asked the state to consider that among other issues. There's no actionable information that is needed from the full board. We're continuing to review these items.
Thank you. Just a couple of things to mention under the report of the chair of the board of directors. One, I don't believe, Ed and I were talking about this earlier. I don't think you received notice about the Pinehurst meeting from the community council. It's on December the 2nd, so you should be receiving that soon. It's a very important meeting for all board members to attend. The other item is our October meeting is October 23rd, so just make sure you note that on the calendar. At this time, I'd like to call on the report of the Chief Executive Officer, Colin Bryan.
Okay. Integrated care initiatives. You know, it was too bad, Dr. Baker, you weren't here last month. We talked a lot about the initiatives that we've been involved in with Buncombe and Mayhack, and we continue with those in great earnest and very excited about those projects. The one is Buncombe County is very much involved with the Health Home project, and that's underway, and I'm not sure we're at a point where we really have any data to share, but I know it's moving forward, and Dr. Green was speaking a little bit about that when he was over last Friday, and it's always a risk to call out somebody in particular, but he's been just a great guy for us to work with, and want to recognize him and thank you for sending him our way to work on these projects. Great guy. The IED Health Home, again, just a good idea. We're really working hard to create much better service delivery for IDD folks, and Stephen Baker, Dr. Baker is a huge part of that. And we're so fortunate to have him here, and his flexibility and willingness. And, I have to tell you, at some point, a lot of this just comes down to the people you can get around the table and things you can get done. And that's this is a really good example of that. Christina's doing a great job of leading that. We have a lot of attention of statewide folks. And what more you might want to offer about that, Christina?
Well, I think for the IDD Medical Health Home, we look for a jump start of that, possibly the 1st of November, to have Dr. Baker, who will be sitting in the Mayheck Primary Care Clinic somewhere, and we'll begin to put an infrastructure around him. We'll be supporting a nurse to be in that clinic. He will be bringing his caseload with him, and I think that in the months to come, and I think, Dr. Heck, if you wouldn't mind, maybe Dr. Crane may be coming sometime. I think there's a wonderful vision there for all of Western North Carolina, for all 3 of these disabilities in these integrated medical health homes that I think that people here would have an interest in, especially families and consumers. So it's so much bigger than I think sometimes people, it has a potential to really be a great service to Western North Carolina for many of the things that are not available today. So we're excited.
I think we, very sensitive to, all the comments about the needs and gaps, and we can all be kind of humbled by, our pace and our ability to deal with it. But this is one we can really be very proud of. And I do not know of another effort like this across the state. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of anything like it. So again, we're moving out ahead and doing great things for people, and very proud of that collaboration. State initiatives. And this is kind of really this and the crisis report are things we can do together. I did want to mention, and Joyce is not here tonight, got volunteered to be part of a DSS, state DSS collaborative with MCOs and I guess a handful of representatives from departments of social services to talk about, what is a huge interface. And I was talking to Mandy about this and Joyce, and then the gentleman from Watauga, who's the director, who will be the Tom Hughes, I think is his name, who's going to be, I think, stepping in for Joyce, who can't attend that meeting. My disclaimer on this, I guess, is a good one. That's where I got my start. In 1978, you can do the math. In Broome County, New York, as a Child Protective Services worker, and worked in DSS for 7 years, so I have a great affinity for the work that goes on there. And I'm the first to say that before I came to Smoky, we were really a great tradition of respect and partnership with our DSS, because it's, we're walking on the same ground, we have the same folks we work with, and are huge stakeholders, and I hope we make that very evident by the way we engage in the community, with our DSS colleagues. So we'll go up there and hear about things that aren't great in some parts of the state, and it's really some very interesting problems. I'm not sure how we can solve. And, one in particular that we dealt with in Watauga County, and in fact it might be a good one to bring back here next month if we can get the policy done, but how we deal with individuals who are undocumented. We're really between a rock and a hard place here. We're not allowed to use state or federal funds for those services. And when it's on an outpatient basis, I think those are usually situations where the way we fund our comprehensive service providers, it's pretty easy for them to just kind of make ends meet in providing service. But in other cases, we've run into a young man in Watauga County who needs a very, very high level of care, or PRTF, and there just is no way to pay for that we currently have. So we're going to work on a policy that would I guess, provide a rational way for us to approach doing that. Maybe next month we can have something, Dr. Martin and Tracy and some others will be working on that. I know that'll be one that'll get talked about. There's just no easy solution. You folks in counties, I'm sure, run across this as well. State initiatives and crisis report in your packet. This was a big push that the Secretary did in the HHS, the Crisis Services Initiative. Jenny Pugh, who's not here tonight, I don't think, was selected to be a member of that committee. Ronnie Deal was a member of that committee, and Billy West, who's the executive director of one of our comprehensive service providers on that committee. A lot of discussion about, again, you've got a whole range of limitations and problems with this end of the service spectrum, and it was great to see in the budget that there was some funding provided, and $8.3 million in total for a variety of initiatives, and you see there's a list of 10 that are here. Now, not to be a wet blanket, but this isn't new money. This is money that's been kind of moved around. So I know like the substance use block grant kind of went from one part of our budget to another. But, it's a way for us to hopefully find funding that can be used for something we're very concerned with, spend a lot of energy on, a lot of effort with Mission Hospital, Buncombe County and others around demand in emergency departments. And this is connected in a lot of different ways here, so let me try to pull it together. You've heard our discussions about moving from 356 Biltmore Ave. The number 10 here on the list would be an opportunity for funding that would really provide a lot of assistance for the conversion of that facility, our offices, into, I guess, what we call a behavioral health urgent care center. And by that we mean, we have as many levels of care there as we could, and I think it probably amounts to about 2.5, where we have outpatient, walk-in crisis service, so all that you might consider, in an ambulatory service delivery style, as well as bedded programs. RHA currently has a facility-based crisis program. We would want to locate that at that same facility, and then even expand that to use, they're referred to as lounge chairs, recliners, which is not a very fancy level of care, but it's proven to be pretty effective. So you can really stretch the service definition, and if you have the facility and the ability to monitor that properly, it turns out to be very helpful for folks. So we're very enthusiastic about approaching the state for that funding. It's only the MCO that can apply, and we would do that really on behalf of, the county is the landlord for us. Of course, Mission Hospital is very invested because of the huge demand at the ED, and then RHA is the service provider. So probably, I guess we're expecting there to be an announcement about the RFP for that sometime in October. Fairly short turnaround, and they really want to move the money out the door. So we'd love to be first in line. So we'll keep you posted on that. Great initiatives. That's the one we would be after. Kind of staying on the theme here of crisis services, we've backed away from, used to be a part of the consent agenda where we have a lot of data and metrics about what's going on in the EDs. Just a lot of discussion with Mission. It seems that the demand there is unprecedented, and I think probably a lot of reasons for that. Not all of which we completely understand. I think many levels of care, especially in Buncombe, have seen just huge demand. On an outpatient basis for mobile crisis, the facility-based crisis is operating at maximum capacity, and by that I mean upwards of 95%. I mean, you can't have any more people there. It's mathematically impossible because of the turnover in beds. So we have a lot of things operating at what feels like maximum capacity and efficiency, but it doesn't seem to be enough somehow. There's going to be a change in the service definition around mobile crisis. And again, for folks that are maybe newer to the service system, mobile crisis is just what it sounds like. It's a service that, in this case, RHA is the provider in the Western Highlands, Legacy counties, Daymark in what we refer to as our northern region, and Appalachian in our western and our traditional Smoky region. There's been an interpretation around that service definition that will no longer allow mobile crisis to be service provided in the emergency department. And now technically this is for individuals with Medicaid. Okay, now, take a quick sidebar. What do we know about the emergency department and those presentations? Well, we know that probably 60% of them are for folks that do not have Medicaid. They are either uninsured or underinsured. So when you read data, for example, in the report this afternoon that talks about ED presentation, that's only part of the story. It's very difficult for us to collect information on that presentation. It does not involve a billable service. It's challenging for the emergency departments to share that information with us, et cetera, et cetera. This change for some of our hospitals will be very significant, and I want to make sure people are aware of that, especially in some of the rural areas where there is a great and positive dependence on mobile crisis to be the behavioral health expertise that's present in the emergency department. These are facilities that don't have psychiatry, they don't have inpatient behavioral health programs. If they have some degree of social work, it's the clinical application of that is just very, very limited. So for some of those hospitals, mobile crisis is the expertise that they depend upon for evaluation, treatment recommendation, and placement for individuals. So how hospitals will deal with that is going to be a very delicate question. The answer, they will either need to deliver it themselves or contract with other providers for that. Now, we have been very aggressively dealing with this with our comprehensive providers that deliver that service. Had a meeting, really just kind of a brainstorming session with them a week or so ago. There will be a big revenue factor with this too, because all of that service that they bill the Medicaid fee-for-service to us is a big part of their budget. It will no longer be a way for them to collect that revenue in providing that service there. So there's a big clinical story, there's a big financial story. And again, when it involves the emergency departments and a level of care like this is pretty big stuff. For many of the mission hospitals, they have already moved to a system that does not use mobile crisis in the ED, so it'll be much less of an impact. But we'll be sure to, I'm sure every month now through the end of the year and even into next year, be talking about this just because it'll be a pretty big issue to adapt to. Not our interpretation, but one that we're going to have to abide by. Moving on with, and again, our move of build more, consistent with, really meeting that service demand. That's a whole other topic. How are we going to move in the midst of doing all of this? I don't know, but we will. And maybe tonight, even after the board meeting, I think we're, very close to executing a lease agreement for that space there. So that's kind of short and sweet. The initiatives with the Western region have really, the pace has slowed, but the activities continue to be very deliberate, making good progress in terms of flipping the switch around call center rollover, so that we are now, as Julie once put it, we've held on to that mutual aid society. You know, whenever the phones need to roll over, because we are unable to answer them, it would be answered by center point or partners, and the same for them. So there's a nice rollover system, so we're all kind of taking care of our own in that regard, and that seems to be working smoothly, which is a good thing. And then, of course, the credentialing project, which is an initiative where, you know, we will be the single credentialing workhorse, if you will, for the other NCOs, and they will, you know, be able to make their independent decisions. We'll do all the work of collecting the information and managing that whole process, which is, I think, more complicated than we even recognize, but we're making, you know, good progress with that. And again, it's a great example of where, aside from all the discussion about, you know, creating a 35-county region from 3 programs that do the same thing, make good business decisions, yes, this is an example of that. So we're very happy about that. But honestly, otherwise, the pace is slow. But we continue to do the work that makes sense for us to do that.
In reference to the change in service definition, can you remind me, when is the date that will be?
January 1st.
Okay. And then the other question is, will we still have a role in placing individuals once the hospital staff has, whether they contracted or whether they're providing it themselves, once they've done their part, will we still have that responsibility for helping them place?
Well, mainly, that is a great question, Michael. I think we're going to have to kind of play things out. Our role in actually doing the placement is pretty limited. You know, we get involved, Dr. Martin gets involved when it becomes a real challenging placement. So we are not the agent that does the placement by and large. We can facilitate that at times. I think what we'll see is a scenario where I am guessing that the smaller rural hospitals will probably want to contract with those agencies. They're already providing mobile crisis services to do basically mobile crisis, except it can't be billed as that. You know, to do the assessment, and again, the placement is done through a combination of the hospital and mobile crisis. And it's, you know, this is each hospital kind of has its own culture, where there is more or less done on a continuum between that outside provider that's credentialed to come in there and do that service with mobile crisis versus the emergency department that is run by the hospital or by a medical group. So that's the answer. That's the answer I can give you.
Well, our next item on the agenda is Vantage Point report from Julie Sinclair, the Senior Director of Quality and Integrity Operations. Julie?
Yeah, let me just introduce that. You know, again, this is our effort to kind of make sure we keep our feet on the ground. And you know, how we've done this previously has been very much focused on clients and families and activities there that really provide some insight into what happens on the ground. With the change of the board and a lot of people just not being real familiar with what we do in our various departments, we kind of shifted this around to have a little more focus on our internal operations. And we're getting to the end of that cycle, but tonight Julie gets to talk about the great work her group does.
Thank you. Quality and integrity operations is a lot about management of the B and C waiver oversight. As some of you know who were board members when I was hired as the waiver contract manager, and that role has stayed with me all along. And now we have a department that largely oversees the B and C waivers. The quality piece has to do with our quality as an MCO. That function has shifted a little from the days of LMEs, where people thought of quality as dealing with the quality within provider networks. Now in an MCO, the quality is internal. The integrity has to do with both internal and external. And not that the MCOs have let go of quality of provider networks, that happens in Sean's department. So in the B waiver oversight, our department and my role are largely responsible for making sure that we implement the functions as they are stated in our contracts with DMA and DMH. We work really closely with Tracy and legal to make sure that we do that legally as well. So it's kind of a dual oversight. So we oversee the innovations waiver as well and do the medical records, and I'm going to talk just a little bit more about these later, but program integrity unit and the internal quality management that I mentioned, and risk management, which is a function that I'm really excited that we've added this year. It's really important for us as an MCO to do adequate risk management. The next slide on your presentation, this little overview, is kind of small. So if you're like me and need a bigger version, the last page is a full page of the organizational chart of quality and integrity for you to review as you want to later on. For the innovations oversight, the C waiver oversight, Jesse Smathers is our innovations technical director. And in this function, we oversee the registry of unmet needs. We have just begun our innovation stakeholders group, and this is a really important committee because it's consumers, families, and providers who give us input about how we implement innovations. And now is an exciting time because we're taking that feedback to the state as they are writing a new C waiver. And just heard from the state earlier today that they are going to allow our innovation stakeholders groups across the 9 LME MCOs to review the proposed service definitions for the new waiver. So that's going to give us a lot of say in Raleigh, and that will be done in this group. So that group typically reports out internally to the Innovations Committee and externally to the state IDD clinical directors meetings. So the group, there is a communication loop there. It's not just a meeting or a support group. We work a lot with Provider Network to talk about the gaps that exist in the service system for individuals with IDD, and work on development of our network providers to make sure we have the services and to make sure that they know what those services are and can implement them in the manner they're intended to best serve the individuals that are participants on the innovations waiver. Along with Tony's department in clinical operations, we provide IDD expertise with the IDD clinical director to the service system as a whole. We provide that to, we work with Robin and Tony's staff to talk about care managers and how to care manage in IDD. She has a lot of expertise in her department there, but we help with the innovations technical pieces and with the care coordinators. Work with care coordinators to better understand IDD and IDD services. And then there is the Western Regional Partnership Innovations Work Group. We also produce the IDD dashboard that's reviewed monthly by the Performance and Quality Committee. We do medical records management. We process releases of information, subpoenas, and court orders. We have 2 staff that do that. Mary Inman is the medical records manager. We process about 50 releases a month. Those are service records that are released for multiple purposes to different places. We maintain the records in accordance to regulations, and one of the exciting things that's going on there is under the wisdom of Nancy Ford, we have a very big and very exciting medical record scanning project, which is going to put all of our records in an electronic format. It's going to be much more effective and efficient to release records. That process is about 60% completed?
I'd say about 45.
45? I'm an optimist.
Yeah, you are.
The other thing that we're doing along with this is fulfilling one of our other roles of purging records. As records age, they are destroyed, and we're doing that at the same time that we're completing this project, but we will be required to do it all along. We also, in this project, have to obtain custody of records for providers who are in our network that go out of business in the state of North Carolina, and so far we've had about 6 providers go out of business, anywhere from just 20 records to thousands and thousands of records. We do the research for the applicants for concealed gun permits. I don't know if you know, but if someone applies to have a concealed gun permit, there has to be a check for the many mental health background. Was kind of surprising to me to know that we do 500 per month in 23 counties.
And actually, that's only 5 counties that we really
We only do
send.
5 counties?
There's only 5 counties
That
that
require
send to us. Yeah,
Okay.
and we process that many. It's amazing.
500 a month.
People getting guns, I guess, huh?
Concealed permits. It's only for concealed carry. The next, yes, Michael?
Could you remind me, I've forgotten, that project where we inherited all the records from New River, has that, all of that been, we had a consultant that was working on that, has that all been?
That's part of this big, huge scanning process.
Okay, so that's still a process.
They are actually, the New River records are
They're-
almost 100% complete.
By the end of September is the
Yes.
goal.
Mhm.
Yeah.
We have the program integrity unit. The program integrity unit participates in the oversight of all investigations that come through Smoky. We do this with compliance and provider network. We oversee all investigations through a committee that reviews 51 referrals quarterly. So of those 51 referrals quarterly, about half of them come to program integrity for investigation. So we get in the program integrity unit about 22 referrals a month to investigate or a quarter to investigate for program integrity. Program integrity investigates specific allegations of suspected fraud, waste, or abuse. The other allegations, such as quality of care, health and safety, those get investigated by Provider Network and Sean's department, the contract performance line. We then, when we receive an investigation and complete it, if there is an overpayment discovered, we work with finance and Provider Network to communicate and recoup that overpayment. And we have identified in the past 6 weeks, about $134,000 of overpayments that Smoke has made to providers. Now, I want to point out that most of this is not fraud. Fraud requires intent. And what we have found is a lot of this is a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of policy, and it's more waste. Anytime we do suspect fraud, we are required to complete an allegation packet with all of our investigation materials and supporting documentation, and we send that up to the Division of Medical Assistance Program Integrity Unit. They research that, and if they believe that it is, in fact, a credible allegation of fraud, we can make a suspected allegation of fraud, but DMA has to identify it as a credible allegation of fraud. They will refer it to the Medicaid Investigation Division for criminal investigation. You can be very proud of your program integrity staff. They have been very good at culling out the difference between fraud and waste and abuse. And of the 3 referrals that we have sent up to DMA program integrity, a good side and a bad side, they have been accepted by Medicaid Investigation Division, so we are accurately identifying suspected fraud. It's unfortunate that we've had 3 instances. So We report to the state monthly on all our program integrity activities, and the Performance and Quality Committee reviews quarterly our investigation oversight report. The quality management line is about our internal functions. We create a quality management annual plan. In that plan, we identify quality improvement goals for all departments and committees and CFTs. We also oversee the quality improvement projects in that plan. One of the things that we've done this year is, in our oversight of policy and procedure process, have implemented a software called PolicyTap. It's an automated policy and procedure system. It's going to be very helpful to us in staying current on all of our policies and procedures. All policies and procedures have to be reviewed every year. This allows us to automate it and put them on a staggered timeline so that they don't all come due June 30th, which can be a burden. We do the state reporting, the monthly measures, the quarterly measures, the annual measures. The annual measures for both DMA and DMH are due November 17th. So that's what we're working on right now. The performance improvement projects are part of the QM annual plan that I mentioned earlier. The way we discover or identify our performance improvement projects is often through the work with all of the senior directors and departments. Each department has a QM liaison, and each department works with the QM liaison to identify different parts of their function that they want to audit internally to see whether they're following policy and procedure for implementing that function. And a lot of times in this self-discovery, we are able to find areas for improvement, opportunities for improvement, and we can create quality improvement projects with those. We also do the coordination of all accreditation application and oversight reviews. So the next project, the next thing that we're going to be working on is the external quality review process. For all MCOs that operate a 1915B waiver, there is an annual review required from an external agency. That's our next, our paperwork process for that is due in December. Then the next project would be our URAC accreditation. That's a national accreditation we have accreditation in 3 function areas. So we compile all of that documentation and submit it up and help all the departments prepare for those reviews. And then we have the interagency monitoring team that we just went through with Mercer. We do that. So we do about 1 a quarter, actually. We do grievance investigations and follow-ups. So far this quarter, we've had 162 grievances that we've worked on. Our turnaround time averages less than 30 days, which is the requirement. Those grievances and the quarterly grievance report are reviewed by Human Rights Committee as well as the Performance and Quality Committee. The risk management, we've had David in place since August 1st, and that's David Boki, our Director of Risk Management. He has created this risk catalog that's pretty impressive. It was presented to ELT Monday. He's identified 219 areas of risk operationally for Smoky. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a really good thing to internally identify your operations for risk so that you can look at the potential impact and also put into place mitigating activities or preventive activities, and you can have potential plans, contingency plans, if one of these risks does actually happen to create a sentinel event, is the way I worded it. David also oversees the incident reporting. That includes the backup staffing incident reports that have been discussed earlier in this meeting, as well as reports of what we call level 2 and 3 incidents, which are either behavioral incidents or abuse, neglect incidents, or death reporting for individuals who are served by our providers. An incident is considered anything that happens outside of the norm of treatment. David also works with Program Integrity and Provider Network to oversee the investigation process because that is an area of risk for smoking. He participates in all compliance activities as well. As far as the incident reporting function, we receive the incidents through a state system. We review each incident, track it. We do a quarterly incident report and have started the backup staffing report. We also have a critical incident review committee that reviews all level 3 incidents and all level 2 death reports. The other thing that our incident review specialists are really good at is identifying those level 2 reports that might be consumer behavior or an allegation of some kind of abuse. They are very good at elevating those to the critical incident review committee if they think that they need attention beyond the incident report, or that the provider, what they've put in the incident report they don't seem to have handled it well. We do a lot of oversight there and a lot of training for providers because this is not an area of strength. That's briefly what we do in a nutshell. Do you have questions?
Just one question. Are there criteria by which any sentinel events or incidents are brought to the attention of the full board?
There have not been in the past, no.
And I guess the question for those of you like our attorneys, is there any reason to, is there any culpability of the board and understanding or not understanding those or being aware of those events?
There is no legal requirement in Chapter 122C to bring sentinel events to the board.
I'm sorry, I didn't, you were
There is no
soft in fact.
There is no legal requirement to bring sentinel events to this board under Chapter 122C.
Or even areas of risk for the organization or for its board members?
We could include that in the quarterly compliance report if that is something you all would be interested in.
Well, I guess the other feature is the bylaws do not have a requirement, if you will, for that.
The only thing that we do is review the aggregate data for both incidents and grievances in the performance and quality.
Probably the level of responsibility for the board is met by Julie's presentation about what's actually being done by staff. As long as you know that this is going on and this is how it's being handled, I think you probably satisfy the legal duties you have. If you had no idea this was going on, of course, then that would be a failure. But I don't think that it rises above that statutory.
I mean, that being said, we can do whatever level, people feel comfortable with.
So, I don't think it would be appropriate for an organization this size for every single sentinel event or adverse, issue to come up to the board. But I think, if I'm thinking about from the standpoint of the public and our elected officials, I think they would have, whether it's in the bylaws or whether we have a procedure for doing it, I think there would be some expectation that we are aware of it or made aware of it and then respond to it. And it's as much of a protection, I think, for the staff as it is for the board, that there's some process for doing it. I just know in other organizations, and in our own organization, if there are particularly sensitive or high-risk situations of risk, we do bring it to the board.
The suggestion I would make that you're all free to consider or reject would be that the Bylaws and Policy Committee, which has not yet met, convene a meeting to discuss this and to discuss whether you want to
revise the bylaws or create a policy around how this would be reported to the board. I believe that Carolyn chairs that committee.
And I bet you they would be pleased to see the policy and procedure for MAHEC on that we might be able to, get some structure.
It's not in our bylaws, but it is in our, we do have a process by which if there are things that are necessary for the board to bring it up.
We could certainly create a board policy around this.
My suggestion would be anything that goes to the federal P&A for the state, which would be Disability Rights North Carolina, should probably be brought to the board's attention too. And I could be wrong, but in deaths, they go to the P&A. But the state y'all may send a report to the state, and the state may send a report to them. I'm not really sure how that works, but.
Well, ironically, Dr. Hipkin, I think a lot alike, because before you asked your question, I was going to ask what are the 2 or 3 most important events that you've identified. With or without the bylaws review, I think it would be appropriate to sometime look at what those 2, 3, 4, 5 most critical ones are. At 219,
Oh, the risk, well, I could.
I haven't slept for a week after I looked at that.
We have some opportunities for improvement around our PHI, our email system, and the use of cellular devices and things like that. Those are the ones that we're most concerned about now. Because what we do is we look at the potential impact and the potential likelihood, and that creates the risk factor. And because a lot of our work involves communication through email and cellular devices, and sometimes that communication involves PHI, we are really scrutinizing those processes right now. That would be the 2 of the top 5 that I can remember.
Well, actually, yeah, that was there, and
The ED.
The ED presentation was there too. So that gives you if you have any doubt about the size and scope of this organization after you sort through those 250 entries, you'll really get a reminder of what a big organization this is and how many just different areas require vigilance, both on the operational side with the services and the system and people and information and how we manage it. I mean, those are 2 good extremes. Everything in between. It's a fascinating report. I give great credit to the gentleman that presented it, and it was all something to think about.
He's done a lot in less than 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really valuable position, and I'm not really saying it because I have any concern about how you're handling it. That's not the issue. It's just that in today's world, there's more and more responsibility laid on the shoulder of the board to be aware of critically important issues. Otherwise, they're not really performing their responsibility. So, likewise, if you sort of have the leadership has the protection and the support of the board in terms of communication to the public or taking some of the blame, some of the burden of the.
I think it might help you to just know, do quickly about our critical incident review process, because we meet twice a month and we review these critical incidents, and Dr. Martin is on that, Tony Shilo, Tracy is there, other senior clinicians, and a couple of other direct line clinicians. We go through every incident. We review what the provider has written about the incident. We review what the provider has done about the incident. We obtain external information, including like when it does involve a death. A lot of them are natural deaths of people who are in care. We review the ME report reports. We gathered 3 months previous medical records to look at what led up to it. So it might create a little bit of comfort just knowing that it's very intense.
It's not surprising at all that it's very intense and very well done. I'm certain of that.
Any other?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess Carolyn, the ball's in your court and will help in any way we can with that.
Wait, I think we have to.
You and Mr. Smarty can't say but we'll help any way we can with it. And, you know, as far as that risk report, I think any draft form now, I mean, we could, you know, I'm trying to think if maybe there's some way to condense it or at least have a way to talk about it. We'll work on that. I think
We could
need
bring
a
the,
little polish to it, but it's,
if you're familiar with the risk report, you know how they are red, yellow, and green. We could bring the red and yellow. I don't know if you want to see on the low grades.
Yeah, you'd have to filter that data that you wouldn't want to, we wouldn't want to.
No, you could join Brian in his insomnia.
But yeah, I'd say the criteria would be the things to keep Brian awake are the things probably that the board needs to know about.
Any other
good
questions?
thoughts and comments.
Outstanding job. Thank you. Any items for consent tonight? No. Is there any other business? Is there a motion for adjournment? Have a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. Senator, we'd like to welcome you again and thank you for being here with us tonight. We have dinner after. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate everybody being here today. We're almost 30 minutes late starting, but this is the executive committee meeting. First, the second item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. You opposed? All right. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting?
Yes, please.
If you have, you have. Is anybody here?
Move be approved.
Okay, is there a second? Any discussion about minutes? Okay, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, Brian, will give us an update on the Western Europe Department.
We canceled our last steering committee meeting, and to refresh your memory, the steering committee is there are 4 representatives from each of the MCOs, partners, and Centerpoint, and then on occasion, I guess, any other staff kind of report on things, and that's where we bring the work of the various subcommittees together, any actionable items or decision-making, and there are activities ongoing. I guess most notably, that would be the successful plan for call center rollover. You know, those times when, for whatever reason, it can be, you know, planned reasons and unplanned reasons why, you know, our folks just can't answer the phone. It's 24/7, 365, so as you can imagine, you know, these situations come up. Planfully, if there's a meeting or some reason why we're taking people offline and unplanned, could be because of volume, could be because of not having enough staff, or people can't get in because of weather or technology. So that's worked out well. We flipped the switch on that. And directly to the center plan partners. And in turn, they have received calls on our behalf. If for no other reason, we know that because Cardinal called and said, well, we haven't gotten any calls from any rollover calls. Is something wrong with the phones or something wrong with the system? And we said, well, no. We kind of kept that there just as an extra layer of insurance in case some of this would work out. So apparently that's going well. Other than that, the big effort has been around our joint credentialing initiative, which we've talked a lot about that. It's a good example of something that can be scaled larger and done in a manner which is really better. I think all three of us would agree that the business processes and the technology that we can employ by scaling it larger is a better effort quality-wise. And at some point, and it gets difficult, of course, everybody, as soon as you talk about consolidating or one versus three doing it, it automatically goes to, oh, you must be saving a whole bunch of money. Well, no, not really. And I think we just need to be honest about that. There's infrastructure costs to do this that are more expensive, at some point in time. And we're also, I think admittedly using processes which are superior, so it's not an apples to apples comparison. Now, all of that being said, I think within a couple of years you can probably say, well, yeah, those initial kind of fixed costs or sunk costs have been recovered, and you're able to do this now in a manner that's less expensive and better quality than what you'd been able to do it if all three of you were doing it. It's a fairly complicated project, more so than I guess I initially thought, not that I'm a particular expert on it. But we're, managing it very closely, and, we can kind of continue to keep you posted on that. It's a good, from a perspective of doing something that makes sense and should make everybody happy because there's a consistent, one way of doing it. I think there's a lot of value associated with it. I think it's questionable whether or not there's a meeting, I think, planned for week after next week or the week after next, October 2nd, something like that. And I'm not sure whether we will have that meeting or not. I offered to, update folks on credentialing if they wanted, and kind of gave a rundown on how I thought the call center was going. So I haven't heard back from folks to see if we have there or not. So has the pace changed? Yes, it has. And I'm guessing, and I don't know if it's a good time to talk about this or how much anybody would care to talk about it. Obviously, there's been a lot of media in regards to Centerpoint and the challenges that they are experiencing with their board and how that relates to anything they would do in the future. Pretty difficult situation there. Pretty difficult.
Ryan, a question right there, I don't, you may not have the answer, but gathering from the media reports and having not talked to anyone about this media reports, I get the idea that there the counties are still picking the people who serve on the Centerpoint board.
Pretty actively involved with that.
Yeah. Why is that different from, say, us? If it was mandated by the legislature to be done a certain way?
I suppose the answer is that the board accepts that or tolerates it. I guess that'd be the best answer I could give you.
So there is an option then to following the,
Here's how I would
come down from the legislature?
Well, is there an option, you know, is there an option to drive the speed limit or to drive faster? I mean, you look at where we got to with all of this, how clear any of it really is, and is the general statute police gonna come and, you know, arrest you if you don't do this or do that? It's, the law is the law, you follow it as good as you can. I mean, the county folks, you know, you live in this world every day. That's how they've made peace with it, I guess, you know. And there are counties that, you know, some of them throw a lot of money in the kitty.
Well, I know that, but my point, I guess, here is how much the county commissioners organization has tried to do what they're doing all over the state. You know, why can't they? Why did we go the route, or, you know, make me wonder.
Yeah.
As a board member, how do they get away with doing that, or didn't try, or, yeah, whatever.
I probably don't have a better answer for it than what I said.
The only thing I would add, I think, Ed, is that because there's only 4 counties participating, it's just a very different scenario than what we have, or what Cardinal has, or what ECBH or any of the larger LPs have.
Oh, I realize that those 4 counties are putting in millions.
It's not even so much about the money,
Number.
it's about the fact
Yeah.
that there's 21 board seats, and there's 4 counties, so they are able to come up with a way to allocate them in a way that keeps those counties happy, and so that's kind
But
of.
in doing that, at least gathered from what I'm reading, they have a lot of leverage there to make the board, or try to convince the board to do what they want.
I'm sure there's a lot of pressure for that, Ed. I mean, you know, that's evident. It's just it's the dynamics that exist in you know, this sort of phase that we're in. So,
Any other, you want to go into the next?
yeah, integrated care initiatives. Actually, let me talk about this and a little bit about the Western Regional Partnership. I think that'd be appropriate for closed session if we invoke the private business aspect of the statute. County Commissioner advisory.
Michael, you want any updates?
The only thing that update is that we have a meeting coming up. I forgot to bring the name, I'm sorry. It's in a few weeks. And, nothing new to report since the last meeting.
Okay, well, agenda item number 7 is a closed session pursuant to Oklahoma statute 143-318-11A6 to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or conditions of initial employment of an individual public office or employee or prospective public officer or employee, or to hear or investigate complaint, charge, or grievance by or against an individual public officer or employee. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved, sir.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing there's none, all in favor of going into closed session, say aye. Aye.
You gonna do my personnel stuff? Why don't you want to do that first, or you want to do that last?
And you want to do the other?
Yeah.
First, and then I'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn the executive meeting?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second, any discussion? Seeing there's no discussion, all in favor of adjourning the executive committee, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're adjourned.
Ed,
I'm gonna go to.
Ed, are you going to chair finance, Mr.
Call meeting to order. 20 minutes later. Welcome everyone. Judy Poe is not going to be with us. Judy's brother had an accident, and so she and Roy decided to go wherever it is he's located. They're visiting there. So I'm going to fill in for her. You have before you the agenda.
I have a motion to approve the agenda.
You have a motion to approve the agenda. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye. Aye. All right, approval of the August 28, 2014 Finance Committee minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. August 2014 financial reports. Red, you are now on picture reporter.
Okay. Yeah, I did hit the recorder. I think it's working anyway. If not, Lisa will code it. Okay, you have before you the balance sheet. I'll go through that first for as of August 31st. I will not go through it line by line, but I will go through some significant items. So cash and checking is about $69 million. The cash and Medicaid risk reserve is now up to 13.4. You will notice a jump if you compare this to past statements under investment for the NC Capital Management. This is the incorporation of Western Highlands, which heavily invested in NC Capital Management into a consolidated balance sheet. So this is the first time we've actually seen it at that large dollar amount. Of significance, and what I will talk about the most, is actually the accounts receivable Medicaid waiver. This is a net figure. So the $4.5 million here is a net figure. We did take a 50% allowance for doubtful accounts. So as of August 31st, the actual accounts receivable is at $9 million plus. Let me explain what that is. That is money we are owed as an LME that through the PMPM we have not been paid. The overwhelming category of aid that apparently we have been shorted is the AFPC money. This is a statewide issue. There have been several meetings with authorities, both in UNA and DNH, in reference to this specific issue. Lisa and I attended a CFO meeting statewide yesterday in which there was another presentation in reference to this. We did receive a partial payment as of the September check on of approximately $2.2 million of what we were owed retroactively, but there's still a large outstanding balance. This balance is growing through time, and it's going to take us process and some time to resolve with the state. To date, we do not have from them a process for resolution. So we can compare eligibility files and say we want to pay this, we want to pay for him, we want to pay for her, and there are hundreds of them. And this is increasing through the months as they go on. And yet we still do not have the process with the state for comprehensive resolution of what is outstanding. So this is going to take some time to resolve. There's another significance to this particular item, and that is in FY 2014, our accounts receivable did not have a significant financial effect on us. That financial effect through time is growing, and it will become apparent as we go through some of the other sort of sheets later on. Questions? Our accounts payable is at $9.6, $9.7 million thereabouts. Our current ratios are healthy, which you will see later on in the graph, so there's no item of concern there. Going down to the fund balance, it's delightful to me to inform the committee that the state, specifically the budget director and the division of mental health, has approved the board's resolutions last month. So we do have authorization to reclassify the two line items that you see are stated as Medicaid waiver readiness and board committed Western Islands and combining them to allow us to use those funds for leasehold improvements and equipment purchases associated with our relocation to Ridgefield or other administrative offices should that not be the case. So that's included. Once we get the audit and those revisions approved by the auditor, then we'll start to see that under the audit. By the same token, we did get increases to the unemployment compensation line, the annual leave payout line, and the retention risk reserve pool, which collectively total $1.6 million. So those lines year to date, meaning from July 1st to August 31st, when we're adding to the unassigned fund balance on the order of $166,000. So that's what we added for those two month periods. Going to the second sheet, which breaks down by Medicaid and by other funds, the income and expense base. I will refer first to column 5 under Medicaid, and this is titled Total Medicaid. You will see halfway down the page that we actually had a deficit on the service end of $428,000. I realize that this was some time that we've actually seen where our service dollar expenses have exceeded our service dollar revenue on Medicaid. Please keep in mind the accounts receivable that I had previously spoken about. An allowance was taken at 50%. Therefore, the quote true accounts receivable is a little over $9 million. If we were to receive what we are owed, that is secure. So it started to have a financial bite upon what appears within the financial statements when it wasn't apparent last fiscal year, but it will be apparent this fiscal year. I was asked earlier, is this stable or is this growing? This is a rolling balance. So until the issue is resolved, we will see the accounts receivable balance continue to grow until we get this issue resolved with the state. Because in essence, people are showing up as we are reconciling on the global eligibility file that they are continuing not to pay us for. So the balances grow as once with IMS. Now, net under Medicaid, as you consider the administrative balances, we do have a net positive balance overall. And that's in the order of over $400,000. On the state, federal, and other funds, we do have a positive balance both on the service end and on the administrative dollars. Question?
In your meeting that you and Lisa had with the state people yesterday, day before, the resolution to this, is it they don't have the money, or is it just questions about the plans?
Part of this is my knowledge of state government and how it works, or more appropriately, how state government doesn't work. And this is a matter of NC Tracks has rolled up how it is working and how well it is working. The issues in reference to the enrollment of individuals by the DSSs and how that has been some history of difficulties within the last 18 months to 2 years. And that has rolled out to have an effect on us. A lot of systems on the MIS grounds need to work for our PM to appear accurately. And obviously, some pieces along the way are not in place. It's an overly simplistic way of putting it, but the fact of the matter is the rollout of NC Tracks has had a direct effect on us as an county and on others statewide. The next sheet is the Medicaid budget to actual. I would make reference to two things here. While the others have made adjustments for what occurred in terms of a August 1st increase in our PMPM rates. Yes, we did get a modest rate increase, which did increase our service revenue effective as of August 1st, as well as an adjustment to the number of enrollees that were compensated for. There was a modest increase in that over what was originally budgeted. It was apparent in the other sheets. It is not apparent in this one. So thus the note that you will see at the bottom. However, while that significantly adjusts some of the negative numbers that you may see here, several observations on a service end need to be made. And that is, historically, the committee is used to seeing expenses over revenues on the innovation side. This is a smoky systems-wide issue when it comes to innovation-related expenses. However, we are seeing an uptick in terms of expenditures in reference to PRTF, long-term residential, and even outpatient-related services. Those are things that service management is on. We are looking into the issue to see where exactly these increases are coming from, and we're certainly on addressing that because they are items of concern. It's starting to trend, meaning you can see this across about a 3-month period, and this is not something that we can afford to not attend to, and yet and let the year go on like this. So, while there are corrections to the sheet, because those additional revenues were not factored into the budget here, they do unfortunately highlight some areas that we do need to pay some attention to. Questions?
Questions, anyone?
Okay, I will go through some of the dashboard items. I will not go through all of them, but certainly if folks have questions, please feel free to do so. Under the LME MCO expense ratios, this is a matter of expense over revenue, the specific subject that's listed on that graph. So the Medicaid-funded services in this sense is Medicaid-funded services over Medicaid-funded revenues. What does that ratio look like? If it's 100%, then it's $1 coming in and $1 coming out. Now what this reveals in the graph is for the month of July, that indeed our revenues over expenses were there, but in the month of August, expenses over revenues was the case, and that is the case overall for that period of time to the average amount. And that's essentially what that means. Ideally, we would want it to be in that band between 90 and 100%, ideally. So the next category talks about state and other federal funds, services, and you notice that is below the median line. This is one of those instances in which expenses were considerably below what we were budgeted, at least for that 2-month period of time. I will now go and skip to the Medicaid current ratio. This is Medicaid revenue versus the payables that we have under Medicaid and what that ratio looks like. Ideally, we would want this to be over a 1-to-1 ratio. You start to get monitored and in trouble if it's at 1-to-1 for a 3 or more month period of time. Healthy wouldn't be anything above a 1.5 over 1, and we are at 2.2 as far as the Medicaid current ratio is concerned. Under total, in all revenue and all expenses, we are at 3.42, which is again a healthy place to be. Going to the bar graph on the Medicaid paid claims, year-to-date budget versus actual, kind of highlight some of the areas of concern here, specifically PRTF, long-term residential, innovations, of course, in my eyes, so just inpatient may have something to do with the supplementals going out in a batch in a very short period of time, but don't hold me to that.
Questions, anyone?
Next, going to the pie chart, Medicaid services by service category. This has remained incredibly consistent over time. I don't expect it to change much through time. When you talk about ICFMR and innovations, it accounts for 52% of all actual expenditures by service category. It's been that way for some time now. The next pie chart, which is Medicaid service expenses by category of aid. Here, 3 categories, AFTC, blind, disabled for 21 years old and over, and innovations. Together, those 3 categories are 2/3 of all categories of aid expenses experienced by us as an only. Again, that has been very consistent over time. And that being the case, in terms of the dashboards and financials, certainly what I think is critical to cover, unless people have some questions to go into anything else in particular.
Anyone have any questions regarding any of the dashboards that you just had explained to you? We need action on that?
On the financials, and you can just do those 2 together.
On what now?
On the financial statements especially.
Okay. The first presentation that he made.
I move to approve the financial statements and advance this to the board.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of approving these?
Aye.
You say aye. Aye. Okay, Mr. President. Still a little low. You've been the dashboard.
The next
Budget
agenda item is the budget continuation. I will go through the highlights and the details that actually be going through the budget amendments themselves. Did we have a state fund, administrative fund reduction? Yes, we did. How much was it? $290,000 in change. Where did it come from? It came from a $1.8 million statewide reduction that supposedly was targeted with the intent of administrative savings from the consolidation of LME's NCOs from the number 9 to an approximation of 7. I don't know where they got that. I don't know that there's anything to be saved by consolidation from 9 to 7. They couldn't figure it out either, so they decided to allocate it to each one of the counties pretty much on the size of how much state dollars that they were receiving, and that was our share. It was approximately $290,000. Thank goodness, it was partially offset by 2 things. One was a modest increase in our PMPM that we received effective August 1st, and another was an enrollment adjustment. When you plan your budget, you plan what your enrollment is going to be for the balance of the year, and our actuals will be high and August will be a little bit higher than that. So it netted out to an increase of approximately $305,000, which netted out the loss on the state side, which is a good thing. Now, less state money or Medicaid money? You guys watch it out there. In terms of on the state side, again, were there other reductions of significance? Unfortunately, yes. Under single stream funding, we did have a $20,000 reduction that was specifically targeted to one individual provider that we decided had previously been given a slice of single stream that they went to non-UCR and awarded a $100,000 award to simply that one provider. So it previously been funded partially from single stream, so they deducted that as a partial offset. And I believe it was providers specific. There was a reduction to the three-way contracts that we have. On the order of $50,000 in a massive two-year, multi-million dollar budget. So it was not as big as that. Of more significance, there was a reduction as far as SA-related services, and I'm looking for that specific page because it was in excess of $200,000.
We have probably what you're just reading from.
Yeah, they do. It's in there. It's in, under the amendments, it is a. You just got two.
Green.
Green.
Green, yellow.
You may not. Not here.
Oh, this one, okay, all right.
There you go.
So I'm sure it's just for flight.
That's because I got an earlier version, because I put down some notes first, so I wrote out the version, yeah. That's what that is.
All right.
254,000 was the reduction, and this was to, unfortunately, child essay prevention programs. Within the context of the project, the department was ordered to identify funds for an expansion of crisis intervention services. But they did it within the context of the existing funded appropriation. And this is one of the lines that they decided to take out of to expand the crisis intervention services. So, take it from one hand, give it from another. Those awards have not actually been made yet. That is one of the thoughts in terms of either funding RHA at the existing building side, or perhaps in Colorado County. I'm not sure, but we certainly don't have to one of those expanded crisis intervention programs, but that has not been done yet. But this is where it So let me get into the details of the amendments themselves, but that kind of highlights as far as the budget continuation is what they the warrant.
Do we need any action on that? I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, on the budget amendments, yes, but not.
But yeah, it's going there.
Okay. The first and most favorite of items, and that is the county match. In reference to Haywood County, in terms of FY15 fiscal year that we just started at, provided on, there was a reduction of $20,000 in their reward. So what they took out last year, they continued this year, and there was a reduction from their previous amendment. There was also a reduction of $4,500 from Ashland. And there was an increase from Allegheny County on the order of $2,887. So the net ended up being, as far as county match is concerned, a negative of $21,800, $12. So that's the first adjustment. The second addresses contracted income. You'll see a number there on the order of $401,000. Recall there's been much discussion about the production program that Brian has previously made reference to. This will be the charge for Centerpoint and partners effective November 1st for what they would be paying us for the services rendered for the convention program. It's their share. And it's under this contractual income line. So that's what that's about. And this will represent from November to June. Retirees portion of insurance, that's simply we've gone through the audits and we've made a determination about what is going to be owed in their pockets. And with that, we take that for retirees, one of which is on the table.
Heritage Portion Insurance.
She passed something forbidding her from.
Oh, Lord, let me take it. Well, only takes a minute. Sorry, I was deep into that.
Okay, the next item is Medicaid administration. Recall that I talked about the small increase in our PMPM as well as an adjustment in the enrollees. It was a little higher than we had budgeted for, so the estimate is at $305,000. The reduction as far as the administrative services reduction on the state administration side that the state has implemented is $290,285. So, going down to the risk reserve amount, because there is an increase in anticipated service dollars and administrative service administrative dollars because of the increase that I just talked about, there also has to be an increase in the risk reserve, so that is the $58,000 that you see here, $58,000 plus. Medicaid capitation B, 1.3 and change $1 million. This is an estimate of the increases. We talked about the administrative side, this would be the service side of what that increase is, as well as the Medicaid capitation C. Both those reflect service. Unfortunately, within that same adjustment, there's an adjustment down there as far as B3 related services of $109,000. So that's the amendment there. Previously spoken about the single stream reduction. This is targeted at one particular provider of $200,000, as well as the single stream three-way contract, hospital contract reductions that we received that in total amounted to $50,000. Mental health trust fund. I think this is simply a matter of notification what the trust fund would be in a continuing operation. I think that's the only thing that this was.
Speak a little louder.
Hmm?
Speak a little louder.
Oh, I'm sorry. The $75,000 under Medicaid, the trust fund, that this came with the continuing.
It was, mental health trust fund, if it's not used in 1 year, they'll allow you to carry it over to the next year, and this was a carryover from the prior year. I think it came, in another allocation letter for it.
Thank you. I talked about the reduction to the child SA prevention line, which is the next adjustment. And other than that, the effects as it reflects our budget categories is on the final sheet and the totals. And so the total adjustments come to a net of 3.3 million and change for a total budget of $360,824,122.
You talked about the county match,
Yes.
and I heard you say Allegheny increased by 2,000 some change. Was that the only county that increased?
There were only 3 counties that changed from FY14, and those were the 3. There were Hayward, Ash, and what was the other one? Allegheny.
Haywood went down.
Yes, Ash went down.
Ash went down, and Allegheny went up.
That was my question. Allegheny was the only one that increased from.
Increase.
Increase.
Like you gotta put a first star on you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? We need a motion on that one, please. Okay, so let it.
Okay.
All right. Any other discussion? All in favor of approving this, please say aye. Aye. Good job, Mark.
Well, we talked about the administrative services reduction, and its amount, I don't need to repeat that into the amount. The only thing I would add in reference to Medicaid waiver accounts receivable beyond what I would say, what I've indicated, is I do want to caution the committee, as well as caution the leadership, that I think this is going to take a while. And the reason that I think it's going to take a while is during the CEO meeting with the DMH and DMA leadership that was, what, 2 weeks ago, say? There were some assurances given about what would be provided in terms of the resolution as far as the data sets were concerned. That was not the most orderly presentation I participated only on the phone that I had heard. But yesterday, other than providing a copy of the global eligibility file, mind you, this is like massive, there was no additional information. So, for example, they did not provide an explanation for the payments that was received in the payroll in September, what they represented, meaning what they paid for. They were not able to identify a process for how they came up with that payment that we received for $2.2 million. I hate to tell you this, but if I give you money, I know why I gave it to you, and can give you an explanation.
And I need to know where to apply.
Well, I didn't get that yesterday. And in terms of asking for when these things were available, they were unable to get a date certain about when that information was available.
So we don't think it'd be resolved in this fiscal year?
I wouldn't hold my breath that it's going to be resolved next month, or the month after that, or the month after that.
Honestly, do you think it'll ever be resolved?
Oh, I think it will be resolved because there's a
I mean, will we get our money?
I think it will.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do think we
The
will.
resolution could be,
Do you think we'll get all that we think we are?
That I'm not so sure about.
Could we attach that date to Lisa's retirement date, maybe?
Yes. Lisa
Let's
can't retire.
She can't bring us this mess.
Never mind. Okay.
I
I
believe
like
that.
that suggestion.
Okay, that should be that, of course.
I simply view it as a campaign, and this will have multiple steps. When, after identification and recognition of an issue, it has been at least, 2 months since there was some acknowledgement from those departments that there was an issue to be addressed, that they don't have a process towards resolution, and they were trying to work out pieces of it with us yesterday, meeting with CFOs as we were meeting with them. Certainly gave me pause. Am I overstating the cases?
No. We keep thinking they're gonna have answers when we get to the meetings, but they just don't. Just don't.
They don't have too many answers, too many meetings.
Oh, okay. Too organization.
That's right.
any other questions, comments?
A hypothetical, I suppose. You know, in the news today, they're talking a little bit more about removing Medicaid from HHS and setting up a new, more bureaucracy, I guess, at the state level. And do we have any thoughts about that, as to how that would affect?
I saw that
MHOs.
this morning.
I don't know, Fred or Lisa or Christine, but
I think it's unlikely that that will happen for a variety of reasons. When they crunch the numbers at the state level, it costs more money to separate it out. You lose a lot of the efficiency of having DMA embedded with other divisions. There are functions that other divisions perform, such as Division of Health Service Regulation that does all the licensure. That is something that CMS expects the Medicaid agency to do. So the way CMS views it is that DHHS is the official single state Medicaid agency. And it has divisions within it that perform different functions related to Medicaid. Obviously, the Division of Medical Assistance is the most important one. But they are all part of the single state Medicaid agency. So to take that out would first of all require federal approval. They would not be able to just do that at the General Assembly by themselves. So I think it's unlikely that will happen, and I don't think it will have any specific impact on our ability to get this money. I think that process is going to continue to go down the path it's going, and eventually they're either going to figure out a way to reconcile it, and they're going to come back to us and say, we think we owe you this much, which I suspect is going to be less than what we think they owe us, or they're not going to be able to reconcile it, and they're going to offer to do some kind of settlement. I think it's one of two options.
That too would be less money.
Yeah, I think financially, they have to reconcile it by the end of this fiscal year.
You think they do?
I think they do, or they're gonna have an issue with CMS if they can't reconcile it by the end of June 30, 2015. Doesn't mean they will, I just think that they will have an issue with they're just the way they audit us. CMS comes in and audits them and looks at their books, and they will have an issue. Is that a fair statement, Fred?
I hope you're right. The General Assembly did not want to pay attention to Dr. Bosch, even though she told them that this is on the Medicaid, rural Medicaid transfer. And it would have devastated our transit folks in Allegheny. Unfortunately, other people brought pressure to bear, and it didn't come fast. They were dead set on privatizing, sitting down that. But it didn't happen this session. I'm sure they'll try again next time.
I bet it's coming. I bet it is. too.
Well, I mean, it was gonna cost a lot more money to do it, because we were doing it very economical by cost sharing different categories of rides. And I think a lot of rural, I'm way off on that.
There's what you were talking about. That's the article you're alluding to. The HS is pushing back against the proposal to take Medicaid out of her department. So pushing back. Okay, any other comments? You got anything else under other? No. Anything else coming from the Finance Committee? If not, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Any other discussion? If not, all say aye. Opposed, no. No. Ayes have it.